Hello and welcome to Fire in the Belly. Today we have myself, Mighty Pete, and we're joined by Nina Harper. Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say.
Good afternoon, Pete. How are you doing?
Wonderfully well, wonderfully well. So, Nina, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. So tell us, who are you, what are you doing, where are you from?
Brilliant. Firstly, thank you for having me on your show. I'm really pleased to be here and thanks for the opportunity. Who am I? I'm a work in progress, really, I guess. I am English, obviously. I originate from England and husband is from Northern Ireland. And we've lived in various places around England, around the world. And we've ended up back here in Northern Ireland, where I guess what my time here has allowed me to do is something that's been on my to-do list for a while now, is to write 2 books about my daughter's adoption journey. I can start with the adoption journey now, or I can let you ask me some questions about that. Sure. I could talk for hours about this, however you want to play it.
Yeah, sure. Well, do you tell me what resonates with you? I mean, that's obviously a big piece that's close to your heart. Is that fair to say?
It is. It's been the journey itself of writing the book has been very cathartic for me. The journey of the adoption and the infertility and the IVF, getting to that point before we got to adoption was extremely emotional, extremely challenging, and it's why I wanted to write the book. One of the reasons really to talk about that and to give people encouragement that if they find themselves in my position, you know, hope is not lost. You can have your family. Families are made up of all different types of people nowadays, and we have a beautiful family as a result of all this. And that's what my book's about, how you can get there, how you can overcome those barriers and really get to where you want to be with your little family, make it work.
Is it fair to say, I mean, doing this then has filled a void that was there, whether it be in terms of help for you or something inside you?
Yeah, it has. I mean, it's when you're in that position where you are going through, I mean, if I back up a little bit, I've got 3 wonderful stepchildren that are all grown up. So, you know, I had my husband's family and I was very privileged to be part of their lives for many years now. And, you know, they've made me a part of their lives and I'm grateful to them for that. So successfully, we have that family, and I actually never thought I wanted children. That changed. As I got older and got into my 30s, that changed. Nobody was more surprised than me. And there was a void physically in the fact that I couldn't have a child. It wasn't working for us. We tried the IVF, got pregnant, had a miscarriage. That was a massive void. And when we eventually got to the stage where we brought our little daughter home, there was almost like a void where I wanted to fill by writing about that, to tell other people that, yeah, this is possible and this, you can make this work and you can actually have those goals and bring them to fruition. That void for me was putting that down on paper and getting it out there to encourage people to believe in themselves and make it happen, I guess.
It's interesting because some people, I suppose, will introvert in something that's so personal and such a, you know, it's an intimate part of you really, but you've chosen the other way.
Yeah, it took it took a lot of thought before I put pen to paper. And although I'd sort of visually in my head mapped out the chapters in the first book when I wrote them, didn't know where it was going to take me. And it's a massively personal story. And I personally was worried that I'd overshared because there's an awful lot of personal stuff in there. But the people, my friends and family and people that are strangers that have actually read the work have given me feedback that if I hadn't have done that, it wouldn't have come across as so genuine and so believable. And I think that's what they liked about it. The really good feedback has been about it rings true. They can relate to it. And had I not have gone that far into so much detail, personal detail, probably wouldn't have achieved that, arguably.
No, it's true. I mean, and you know, to share all that level of emotion, I'm curious to know why where was the fear coming from when you're saying you worried that you'd overshared?
The fear. Well, I worry about everything. I am. That's one of my skill points. So, you know, if I'm not worrying about this, I'm worrying about that. But I think it was on several different levels. Firstly, I am quite a private person. So to do this was absolutely a massive turn of my character, and to share everything I was frightened of oversharing in that respect and revealing who I was. I mean, my sister, when she read the book, actually came back to me and said that she feels like she knows me on a whole other level, you know, and that for me was a massive awakening because we've grown up together, we've spent lots of time together, shared a lot of stuff. Yeah, that was her feedback. The other level, I guess, was I am taking a risk here. I want to tell my daughter's story. I want her to know how much I fought for her, how much she was wanted, and how hard we fought to bring her home. But on the back of that, it's singling her out as different. People know who she is. While she's going to have a wonderful record of everything that we did to bring her home when she gets older, and hopefully that will make her understand a little bit more about her background and answer some of the many, many questions I know she's going to have, many of which we don't have answers to because we just simply don't know the information. Whilst we're giving her that tool and that gift, if you like, we're also putting her out there, singling her out as different. And that was a risk. There was a fear there that was I being unfair to her? Because at the end of the day, this is about her and she's the most important part. And I want to put her first. So I guess there was a kind of multifaceted fear level there. But, you know, that's what you got to do. You got to face that fear. If you truly believe this is the right thing to do, then you've got to do it and make it work, really.
Well, that leads nicely. I mean, I suppose to ask the question again, what is fire in the belly? What does that mean to you?
I think that the main thing is not being afraid of that fear and not allowing it to stop you do what you want to do, not taking no for an answer. I mean, we heard no so many times, you know, like when my husband had his reversal of a vasectomy, it was kind of like, well, you know, your sperm count is low, it's probably not going to happen. When we actually got pregnant, well, is this going to be a viable pregnancy? And then there was a miscarriage. So this was all generating fear and emotions in the background, and we were getting told no constantly. When we embarked upon the adoption journey, I mean, the book will go through all of the detail about how many times we were told no and in how many different contexts. This won't happen, you can't do that, you're never going to make this work, you know. And fire in the belly to me is not taking that no, saying I'm not accepting that, I've got this drive, this is what I want, this is my goal, I am not frightened to challenge this, and being strong enough. And sometimes it literally was crying, throwing, kicking and screaming, you know, and saying I'm not putting up with that, and then taking that, I guess, into a sort of proactive stance, identifying what the no is, identifying those barriers, those challenges, looking at what's the solution for this, let's calm the emotion down, what is the solution, and then what are the options really, and then find the solution that's going to get you around that no. So the fire in the belly is that drive to get over that and just not accept that no, keep going, keep pushing.
I mean, by default, are you, you know, do you enjoy a good problem to solve, or, you know, do you find that overwhelming?
I enjoy it. Sometimes I will look at the big picture and go, oh my God, where do we take this, you know? But you know that you can actually, if you just take 2 minutes, take a deep breath, nothing is insurmountable if you can actually get your head around it and sit down and work it out. There are sometimes barriers that we can't solve that, we physically can't solve that problem, but there may be another way to fix it, if you like, another route, you know, into the solution of that. So yeah, I do enjoy a good problem solving. I mean, literally when I was doing the adoption, the way I do it is I'm very good at love record keeping, love a good record keeping exercise, you know. So I had a red, amber, green chart for every single thing that we needed to do, and some were green because this was going fine, you know, some were amber, oh, we're having a little bit of problem here, and the red ones were the ones that this is the problem that we're not going to be able to solve, so let's find a way around this, let's find something else that we can do to overcome that. And my whole life for sort of a couple of years was red, amber, green charted, and it was just madness, but that's what works for me. And you know, the pleasure of turning those reds green, and seeing that you're getting towards that goal, for me was what kept me going on that drive, because you can see it is happening slowly, but it's happening. So yeah, that kept me going for the drive to overcome those problems. Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, that's quite you know, a structured and a you know, a very focused way of doing what could be a very emotional journey. So you've a mix of both there.
Yeah, I think so. I've kind of grown up with this in my background of what I've done with work. You know, my taking exams, passing them to get promoted, taking a bachelor's degree, taking a master's degree. I've always been focused on that next aim or goal, if you like. And to do that, I am very much about to-do lists. I am very much about physically writing things down. Brainstorming is massive for me. I'm actually sitting here with, you asked me what fire in the belly is. I've got a very nice little chart here with, you know, the brainstorm, fire in the belly, and the little things coming off it, just to clarify in my mind. And I find that I am a very emotional person, and I am easy to cry. I'm easy to get moved by things. And that clarity that I need, I can gain from that by literally physically sitting down and saying, right, let's write this down, let's put it on paper. I can then visualize that path where I'm going to go and how I'm going to make it work, really.
So, confession time, are you a doodler?
I, I guess I am and I'm not. I'm not. My husband is. He'll doodle everything, and if he's listening, he's doodling. I am more about. I'm a note taker. So what I'll do is I'll write some keywords down, and then I'll kind of not so much doodle, but I'll have words coming off those words. So it's more a kind of vocabulary doodler rather than an art doodler, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely.
there's notes everywhere when I'm in the middle of something.
I'm seeing a lot of spider diagrams here. A lot of
Yeah, love a spider diagram.
you can't beat them, But it's always interesting the way some people just love a straight list. I'm very clean and neat writing. I'm the opposite end. I'm kind of stick it to the wall and go crazy and
Yeah.
see where we go. Multicolored, multifaceted.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think, I love a highlighter pen. Give me a set of highlighters and I'm away. But my daily life, I'll have a to-do list for each day that I'm working on. I think most people do nowadays. But even if that's a mental to-do list when you go to the shops, what you got to do. But when you're actually sitting down trying to work the problem out, that's when the spider diagrams come into it, and I can actually visualize that way forward through doing those. They're a massively valuable tool. They always have been for me. It's just the way my brain works, I guess.
Mm. But it's interesting, almost the immediate response to a problem or a perceived problem as such is to, thrash it out, see, look at all the variants of that, right?
It is. And, I've worked in jobs where I had a job working when I lived abroad for the post office, quite a senior management role, and wasn't really completely okay with how it worked. I'd come in from a different genre of work, and to actually physically sit down and thrash that out, I didn't know the processes and procedures. So for me to understand that was a case of sitting down and thrashing it out on paper and physically writing it down, doing a structure chart, how it all worked, break those pieces down individually, gives me the comprehension and the understanding and the ability to move it forward. Otherwise, as you say, for me, the problem is just too great. It's something I've got no experience in, and you're never gonna make it work unless you can physically sit down and take it piece by piece. And you're just making me think. I've not read the book, but lots of people have told me to read it. The How to Eat an Elephant, and the saying about it's in small chunks. That although I've not read the book, that works for me. You've got to break it down. You've got to look at its component parts. Otherwise, the whole is just too overwhelming.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's so many. I mean, Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah.
The other ones just gone. Yeah, sort of Eat That Frog. There's loads and so
Yeah.
many there about that sort of chunking process. So take us right back then, Nina. Who are you? Where do you come from originally? Talk to us about your background and junior you.
Junior me. Oh, crikey. Junior me was not a very confident person. Confidence is a challenge. You have to put on that professional cloak, go out there and work it and say, yeah, I can do this. Quite, I wouldn't say insular, but you look at, since I've done the old Myers-Briggs and things like that, and I come out as an introvert rather than extrovert. I'm not out there. Again, here I am today telling my story, which is I've had to work on over the years, because years ago I wouldn't have done this. Junior me would have been a few close friends at school, which is no different to adult me. A few close friends, not hundreds of them. Junior me was into things like netball, sports, running, dancing, played a musical instrument, all the things that tend to drop off as you turn into an adult and you grow up, apparently, because you don't have the time anymore. Still like my sports, still do running, gym work, whatever. Lockdown obviously has probably changed that slightly, and you're now exercising inside rather than in a gym. Junior me worked very hard at school, got a little sister, there's only the two of us. Parents who basically their values were all about work hard at school, get yourself good grades, get yourself a good job, and then you go on to be successful, not necessarily money-wise. There wasn't this big money drive, although we didn't have a lot of it when I was a kid. And then those values have kind of come with me through life. But as I do put it in my book numerous times, the other side of that, something that I feel I've missed out on because I've been focusing on the next exam or whatever, the next promotion, is fun. And it's very easy, if you're an introvert who's growing up in an environment where you're working hard to pass exams, to lose sight of the fun. So the message I've put all the way through my book to my daughter is, yes, you do that hard work and you go through life, you help others, you don't hurt others, but also have that fun. Because I feel that, I kind of didn't necessarily have as much fun as I should have done when I was younger. But then I'm quite a sensible person, so it's not been a real loss as such. Never took a gap year, went straight from school to college, then went and got a job. Worked in the insurance industry, of all things. which stood me in good stead and taught me an awful lot of stuff. But just it's not me. I'm not good at sitting behind a desk and 9 to 5 and lots and lots of emails and stuff. Not me. Don't enjoy it. So kind of moved on from there. Really did a few jobs with insurance type backgrounds. Ended up joining the police service. Spent 16 years as a police officer. Again, promotions, exams. Up in the grades, and somewhere in the middle of that got really sick and tired of living in British weather, and basically said, look, I want to try something different. I want to develop me. I want to see what else is out there. By this point I was married, so my husband and I upped and off we went to the Caribbean and spent 2 wonderful years in the Cayman Islands. Absolutely loved it out there. But by this point my own mother had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And it wasn't, and my husband was missing his kids as well, because obviously they came out in the holidays, but we didn't see a lot of them. So it wasn't a place that at that time was right for us to stay. So we made the hard decision to come home, spent some time obviously with mum, and lost her 14 years ago this year now. And after we lost her, within all that, there was further promotions and a lot of hard work and stuff going on at work. After we lost her, we both looked at each other, 2011, and said, look, we're not happy here again. And off we trotted back to Cayman. And I'm kind of whizzing through all this stuff, but Cayman actually played a very, very big part in the adoption. I honestly, truly believe, had we not have been living in Cayman for what was going on politically that affected international adoption at that time, we would not have brought our daughter home. There was an awful lot of stuff going that I talk about in the books. There's an awful lot of stuff going around political fallings out between our daughters from Russia and the UK. And same-sex marriage came into this a great deal. Cayman Islands is currently going through a bit of a metamorphosis, because when we were there back in 2011 to 16, they did not support same-sex marriage, which was a quite interesting scenario because it went totally against our values that we've been brought up with in our own country. But we were required by the Russian courts to provide a letter stating that Cayman would not allow same-sex marriage to take place, otherwise they wouldn't have allowed our daughter to be adopted to us. And Russia actually shut down international adoption to countries that were supporting same-sex marriage at the time, which was horrific, because by this point we'd actually met our daughter, and there's 2 visits you go on before you adopt. We'd had the first visit, we'd met her, we bonded with her, and then all of this kicked off, and it was kind of shrouded in a political cloak around policies, but this was the, if you like, underlying feeling behind it as well. So it was affecting adoptions. There were couples in the States that were being massively affected by this, because Russian adoption to the States was massively affected. And a few of us in the UK were affected as well. But because we were in Cayman, we were actually we were giving a letter saying it wasn't in their law, they didn't allow it. And because of that, we were allowed to proceed with the adoption, which did not sit comfortably with us because it goes against our own values. But had we not have accepted that, because that was a situation in Cayman, we wouldn't have brought our daughter home. So Cayman plays a massive part. So we were out there for between 2011 and 2016. I actually thought we were going to stay there forever. I thought I'd end my days out there. But with all good plans, life intervenes. Parents, we'd lost my mum, but my husband's parents were getting older, and we ended up back in the UK back in spring of 2016. And again, as I said at the start of this, had we not have ended up back in Northern Ireland, I don't think I would have written the book. I really don't think it would have been on my to-do list, and it would never have happened. So those decisions and that journey that I've had have kind of brought me to this point where we're having a chat today about the whole of this. So, I'm grateful for having had those opportunities, really.
It's interesting listening to your language there. You're very matter of fact about what happened and when it's happened, and also it appears you've concluded about why certain things have happened.
When you say concluded, do you mean the conclusions I've drawn from it?
Yeah, and indeed. I mean, just in terms of whether it was a good thing, whether it was a bad thing. It's happened, it's done, it's a past event, but also you've categorized where that was positive, negative, and contributed.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. There are days, like for example, my stepson himself now is married, and he and his wife had a baby in February of this year. Which, due to COVID, thank you COVID, we haven't managed to see. We are fingers crossed, hoping to get out there towards the end of the year, but we'll see what COVID does with those plans. But when she announced she was pregnant, I had to leave the Skype phone call and go and sit and cry by myself. So I may come across as very matter of fact, and that don't get me wrong, that does not take away from how pleased I am for them. It's their little family, they're building their world. But even now, even after my daughter being with us for, 6 years this year, we've had some beautiful, wonderful times with her. And we're very lucky to have her. Those feelings haven't gone away. They are with me. They're a part of me. I don't think I'd have it any other way, because had we have been successful at IVF, had we have had our own natural baby, then I wouldn't have Malvina. And Malvina is my daughter. But those feelings are a part of me, and they're what make me who I am today, I guess. And you talk about junior me, obviously none of that was in any of my plans. I wasn't ever going to get married and have children. And here I am a long way down this route, and I kind of embrace that, because although it can be very painful sometimes, I don't want to forget that. I don't want to forget what led me to this point and how lucky I am to have got her, because of stuff that has been negative to me in the past has led to this massive positive. So yeah, it seems matter of fact when I talk about it, I guess, because I'm summarizing, but it goes with a whole raft of feelings that sit behind that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just curious, when you mentioned there about, you had no intention of having kids, where was that coming from?
I don't think it was something I subconsciously thought of as a teenager. As I go back to my conversation, I wasn't very confident, and I didn't think I was the sort of person that would actually end up getting married. I didn't think I'd find someone, wasn't that confident. But also when I did, and we did get married, and he came with this wonderful package of kids that did nothing but fight and want of a better word, bitch at each other, and argue as kids do. I'd never really been exposed to any of that before, and all of a sudden I've got 3 of them at various ages that I had to try and win over for a start, because I'm not their mum. And deal with all of their growing up, their issues, the challenges they were facing. I was never going to get all of that right. And we would go out for days in the car, and they'd all sit in the back of the car having a go at each other, and my little peaceful world with no arguing had suddenly gone, and I had all this going on. And that, for a while, it sounds awful thing to say, but it's a true and honest feeling. It reinforced the fact that I did not want to take myself down that road. I didn't want to have the children, the constant demand on all your time. It was great when they were with us. We also had a lovely life when they were with their mum. 2 out of the 3 of us, 3 of them ended up living with us anyway, so they became permanent residents of our household. But for that while we had that mixed approach, I still had a kind of a sense of freedom in some respect as well, and I didn't want to tie myself to being a mum full time. I was absolutely adamant about that. And then that, as I say, kind of very quietly at first, just started changing. Stuff that I didn't really understand was going on. It's obviously a female body clock ticking kind of thing going on, and totally took me by surprise. And my husband Rob was brilliant when I actually started talking to him about this. Nobody was more surprised than me. He was quite surprised, but nobody more than me. And I think he could have gone one of 2 ways. He could have said, I don't want this, I've got 3 kids, this is my family, I don't want any more. But he was absolutely brilliant, didn't have to do any of this. Put him through a lot of pain, a lot of emotional stuff. After the miscarriage, when we started talking about adoption, he was just as supportive, and on we went. But yeah, at the start, no way did I want to be, I was career focused. I wanted to be successful in my career, had this drive to get going, had all sorts of problems around getting promoted at the time. And going back to what we said about not taking no for an answer and overcoming those, getting exposure to situations that would put me in a position where I could talk about that in an interview and secure that promotion. That was my goal at the time. And all of that, as I say, quietly changed, and my life just completely went off the rails and took a different path, which has ended up leading me where I am today, I guess.
Do you believe you are where you're supposed to be?
You know what? I love that question. Years and years ago, I sat when I must have been about 18. It was my first job, I think. Anyway, one of our area managers stood up in the insurance industry, and he said to the room, "You are right now exactly where you want to be." And I thought, what a load of old tosh. What's he talking about? And he, in his wallet, carried around a picture of a buffalo. And he used to get this out of this meeting and say to us, I want to go on safari. And this job allows me to earn the money to pay for my next holiday. My next holiday is going to be a safari. So what he was saying is he was right where he wanted to be. And he was telling us, the rest of us, that that's exactly where we wanted to be. Now, my sort of 9-year-old self sat there and thought, you are joking. I do not want to work in the insurance industry for the rest of my life. There's more to life than this, 9 to 5 commuting on the train. No, I'm not. But I guess the older I've got and the more mature I've got, amazingly enough, I've grown to understand that statement. I am not meant to be necessarily here for the rest of my life, but right now yes, I do think that this is possibly where I'm meant to be. We've got all in our lives got so much going on with family, pressures of work, pressures of COVID nowadays, pressures of life, emotional pressures, especially as we get older, parents getting older, all of that stuff going on. And we make our decisions in life based on that. And I think I don't regret those decisions. I am happy in the fact that I've taken those decisions. And I think that, yes, I am extremely comfortable with where I am right now. Where that will take me in the future, goodness only knows. One of my friends is already saying to me, is there going to be a third book? And I'm like, I don't have anything to write about at the moment. When I do, I'll write it and I'll let you know. But whether that will take me off somewhere else, I don't know. But if you'd have spoken to me when we first started adopting my little girl, would I be sitting here chatting to you today? I'd have said, don't be silly. Nobody wants to hear my story. So, yeah, in those respects, I feel very fortunate that I've had the opportunity to do it and to come to here and have a chat with you today.
Talk to me about the process of writing the book. I mean, was it something that came to you? Is it something you enjoyed?
I loved it. I say it's very cathartic, and I still, even when I read it back now, I read it sort of last week before the interview, because you need to remind yourself of this stuff. You know, whilst it's part of you, sometimes when you read your own work back, you think, oh yeah, I'd forgotten that little bit, or you know, that means more to me now, or something different. And you know, I'll sit and read chapters and I'll cry as I read the chapters. You know, but that's me still embracing and reliving that journey. I guess. How did it come about? I actually, there's a chapter in one of the books I've written about how that kind of evolved. I was working locally in sort of like the Hillsborough, Lisbon area at the time, and whilst I had a job that I really enjoyed, before I left Cayman in 2016, I'd kind of felt this is something I need to do. You know, I've got this little wonderful being, this full of fun, full of life, this wonderful little person that never had a life really, so to speak, and nobody came and saw her, and she was all alone. And now she's got all these people that are interested, family, friends, you know, people that love her and care for her. And I wasn't on my journey alone. I know of other people out there through social media that were going through the similar sort of stuff. And I sort of wanted to say, you can make this work, guys. This can happen. Don't lose faith. You know, this can happen. And that idea was there. I also I had the idea and wanted to write a record, as I said earlier, for my little one, for when she grows older. So she knows the technical aspects of it, but she also knows the emotional journey that we went through. And I guess roughly in my head, I'd mapped out a number of chapters, sort of, you know, and various loose headings around where those chapters were going to go. And I'd parked that when I was in Cayman. I'd sort of parked that and said, one of these days I'm going to do that. Then when we came home, as I say, I'd had various few jobs and I was working locally in the Hillsborough, Lisbon area. And I went on holiday to Costa Rica with my family. And there's a wonderful, I don't want to get told off for plugging you, but there's a wonderful travel writer called Nadine, who writes books on Costa Rica. And before going, I'd done a bit of research and I'd read her books. And do you know what? She was like an inspiration to me. She was like, this lady's literally just moved house and she's written these wonderful books and people are buying them and they love them. And she's believed in her own journey enough to do this. Why can't I do that? It's not the same subject, it's nowhere near it, but why can't I physically do that and put this down on paper? So I went out there and I had the holiday and we actually stayed in her house. Long story about having a hotel room that was infested with bugs and it was just horrific. And I ended up phoning her up last minute and saying, help, your house is a B&B, have you got any room? She fortunately said yes. So I got the chance to meet this lady whose books I've been reading. And I got the chance to talk to her about it. And she basically said to me, what are you waffling on about? If you want to write it, go and write it. It's your story. You know, you're procrastinating, go and do it. And I was a bit perturbed by this. I was a bit like, oh, is it really that simple? And at that point in time, when I came back, I was really conflicted because I was enjoying my job. It was on the verge of becoming quite interesting. I'd only been there sort of 5 months. But this desire to write this book was taking over. And I couldn't do both because obviously with childcare and with a full-time job, I just didn't have the time. So I resigned and said, whoops, what am I doing? You know, but I resigned and said, and we were actually looking at maybe going to live in Costa Rica area at that point as well, which is not panned out. That's a whole other story. But I resigned from my work and I literally resigned on the Friday, sat down on the Tuesday the next week and started writing. And I still had that little list on my phone of chapters and just dove right in there and wrote the prologue first and went on from there. And I wrote the first book in 5 weeks. I literally had 5 weeks before my daughter finished school for the summer term. And I thought, if I don't get this done, you know, I've got 8 weeks where I'm not going to, because I'm entertaining an 8-year-old now. Well, she was 6 at the time. So I literally just wrote all day for 5 weeks and came up with a finished product, and I found it massively cathartic. Everything that kind of been bubbling around for weeks, months just came out, and it actually took me in some places that I wasn't expecting to go. But yeah, really enjoyed it, which is obviously what then led on to the second one, the follow up to take it further, if you like.
It's amazing though to have found that process, and I'm curious in terms of the writing. I mean, had you a certain agenda in terms of when you were writing and what you were putting out?
I think there's always, I guess we've all got an agenda because we've got an aim where we want to go. So there is some kind of loose agenda. Mine was really, as I say, several main reasons. The first thing was to raise the profile of international adoption. Because this doesn't get talked about a lot. Those of us that have done it, it can be a massive success story. Appreciate it doesn't always work, but for me, for my family, and for other people out there, it can be a massive success story. It does not come without challenges, and we've had some serious challenges with our little girl along the way. And we will probably continue to have challenges as she grows up, but it is a success story. It was to encourage people to think about international adoption. A massive emotional drive for me was when we were in Russia. Our little girl came from a baby home, and she's one of numerous baby homes. She was baby home 13, and she came from St. Petersburg, and in St. Petersburg alone, there were 600 little girls, not just boys, but little girls, under the age of 4, because the baby home's going from 0 to 4, and when they hit 4, they move to an orphanage until they're 16. So there were 600 little girls under 4 in baby homes alone in St. Petersburg. And the emotions that went with that, from being sent, you get matched to a child. This is a long process, and part of the process is getting matched to a child, and you are sent videos of these children. Okay, you get matched to more than one. So we had 3 videos sent through to us of potential matches for us, and just watching these kids is like, you're deciding their future, because you're going to reject some of them. You're not going to take them all. And that emotional drive to kind of tell people about that, to make people aware of what you go through, to make people aware of the life these kids are living, was massive. So yeah, there was the drive to tell the story, to encourage people to look at international adoption. There was a drive to tell people what the process is, not just technically, but emotionally, spiritually, financially. There's masses in the work that I've done around the finances and the unexpected costs, because they are huge, very, very scary, and you rack up debt as you go along. And then there was the agenda around making sure that I had a record, because the older I get, I'm going to forget some things, and she's going to come out with questions that, as I said earlier, necessarily won't have all the information, but it is so important to me to give her as much information as I can. She's already said to me, aged 8, "Mummy, who is my real mummy?" And I'm like, wow, stab me in the heart, why don't you? And we have to take a deep breath, and we have to have a little chat about, okay, well, let's think about what real means first, because a real mummy is there when you cry. A real mummy is there when you have nightmares. A real mummy is there when you fall over and they pick you up. A real mummy is there when you do something absolutely brilliant and they celebrate it with you and they tell you how proud you are. So what does real mean? So we don't tend to try and use that terminology. We've talked about birth mummy and adoptive mummy. So there is that clear distinction. And she's going to ask questions, and I will do my utmost to give her the answers I possibly can. But, the agenda around this book was, well, what can I give you that will show you, A, how much I fought for you? Because if she ever accuses me when she's a horrible teenager, and I've been through teenage years 3 times, and it's scary, of not fighting for her, of not supporting, I'm just going to say, sweetheart, read the book, but also technically of what we did go through with the process to actually find her for a start, to prove that we were worthy, because that's a massive part of the adoption process, prove you're worthy, and to bring her home. So I guess I said to you earlier, I talk a lot, but in summing all of that up, there was a massive drive to kind of encourage people to look at adoption, to give these kids that need a home, to provide an authority, if you like, for want of a better word, a dialogue on the process and what that means and how it works, and also to provide that record for my little girl as she grows up, to say, hey, this is your journey too, sweetheart, and this is what we did. So they were the main 3 things, I guess, that would have been on my agenda when I was writing that. Didn't even know if anyone would read it at the time. That wasn't about that. It was about let's try and drive those 3 goals and see where it takes us.
And as you've used the words cathartic and almost the process and the journaling, I mean, that alone seems to have been a very useful exercise for you.
Yeah, it was massively, because there were times when I thought it was never going to happen. There were times when I was an absolute emotional wreck. I talk about in the book. In my past I've suffered panic attacks. I don't know if suffer is the right word. Lived with panic attacks, and you develop coping techniques. And I remember, again, I talk about it in the work. There's one time I was sat at my desk, senior management position, sat at my desk in Cayman, and this panic attack in the middle of the adoption process came from nowhere, and I was absolutely frozen, couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and all those coping techniques that I've learned over the years kicked in, got control of it, got myself back to where I needed to be. But this was all around stuff that was going around. We'd had that first visit, we'd met our little girl, and then it was like, well, actually, we don't think you're going to be able to have her. You're not going to be able to adopt her because of X, Y, and Z issues that are going on in the world right now. And I just thought, we've got to make this happen. So, and I guess going back to your question about fire in the belly, it's not fearing those panic attacks. Anyone that's ever had one, they're horrible. They're scary. When you don't know what they are, you think you're having a heart attack or something. You think something seriously wrong. But going, hang on a minute, you've dealt with this before. I'm not frightened of this. It's horrible. It's going to feel nasty for the next few minutes. Get your coping techniques, get your head in gear, put all of those techniques into being right now, and then you allow yourself to bring yourself back to your normal position, where you normally live your life, and don't fear it, because if you fear it, it's going to get out of control. And actually, that was an obstacle for me to overcome, and I wouldn't say I've overcome them, because I've no doubt I'll have them in the future. But to be able to live with them, to learn to live with them, and to use that energy and say, right, okay, I know what I'm feeling, but I can deal with that, and I'm going to use that to drive this forward. That's probably the hardest thing in that respect, in the physical aspect of how it manifests itself. But yeah, so writing that work, writing the book, getting it all down on paper, allowed me to almost step outside myself and look at me as an individual. And that's a warts and all review of yourself, and you have to be quite honest with yourself. As you do when you do an adoption, you have a home study, 6 months of someone looking to every single aspect of your life, very intrusive. And again, at the end of that, you get a nice little product. You get a 30-odd page report that talks about you as an individual, you as a member of a couple, you as a potential mother, and it can be quite hard reading. And there are some things that open my eyes in there. There were some lovely things, really nice things were said about me that I actually hadn't realised about myself, but there were also some quite eye-opening things, not necessarily negative, but I hadn't realised about myself. And even acknowledging that in the book and talking about that, it's massively like a healing process, if you like, of just revisiting what you've been through and letting it all sink in and understanding.
It's quite something, I'm sure, to have somebody else. Maybe the word judge is maybe a bit strong, but assess your life.
Yeah, I don't think judge is a strong word. You are right, they're assessing, but they're making a judgment on you. They're saying whether or not they support you for adoption, and they will only support you if they think that you're worthy of being a potential parent. And this has been a big aspect that I've had to struggle with over the years, because if you become pregnant naturally and you have a baby naturally, you are not subject to that level of scrutiny, not unless you do something wrong in the eyes of social services or the authorities. Yet if you go to adopt, from the very first moment you embark upon that home study, I mean, even before then, you have to get referees to say, people support you in this journey, and you rely heavily on your friends and your supporters to do that for you. And it's a big thing to ask of someone, because, they're putting pen to paper to say nice things about you. So we had to do that first, and then that kicked off the home study. And it has to go to an adoption board to say whether or not they're going to let you proceed. Then the home study comes in, and they will tear your life apart. They will look at you and your husband, how you interact. They will look at the physical aspects of your house. Is your house safe? They will look at your finances. They will look at your emotional beliefs, your spiritual beliefs. They will look at, how you present yourself. And they basically turn your life upside down. And they ask very, very intrusive questions. And I completely and utterly support that, because at the end of the day, if someone's going to let me take a child, take them into my life and be their mum, then I am quite happy for you to ask me anything. Go there, open Pandora's box, open it and ask me, because if I have to step over that journey, that obstacle, and prove to you that I'm worthy, then I'll do it. But it is something I struggle with, the fact that even after you've done the adoption, I talk about it again in the work, but we had to adopt Malvina twice, because we did it in Russia, and then when we bought our home, we had to adopt her under British law in Cayman again. which meant a further 3 months of scrutiny by the Cayman authorities again, and a Cayman court date again. So we'd done the Russian court date, we had to do a Cayman court date, and then you embark upon a journey of, okay, she's yours, you bring her home, and you sign up to post-adoption reports. And the first few come in very quick succession about how she's settling in, you know, are you feeding her? Are you clothing her? Are you looking after her? Excuse me, and they go on until she reaches 18. And again, if you give birth to a baby naturally, you don't have to provide social services reports, you know, but we do. We have to have these reports done. We have to get a social worker to come into our home, get them translated, send them off to Russia, and that goes on until she's 18. So, you know, but bring it on. If that's what I have to prove to you, that my daughter's in a safe environment and she's doing well, then that's what I'll do, you know. So yeah, it's challenging to say the least, but absolutely worth it.
And why, can I ask at what point, you know, the decision to go the adoption route, at what point triggered that, and where was that initiated?
Yeah, that, as with all things, that was kind of rolled up in a lot of decisions about our life at that time, because we'd undergone, obviously, the vasectomy reversal, we'd undergone all of that. We'd embarked upon the IVF journey because that just wasn't working for us. I actually had 7 rounds of IVF. Anyone that's done IVF, it's massively traumatic. You know, it's financially, it's massively traumatic, but physically it's horrible. Emotionally it's draining. You know, you've got to try and keep your strength, and you've got to be part of a strong family unit to be able to do that. And I don't necessarily mean your husband. I mean, whether it's family and friends, you've got to have a support network. You've got to be able to talk to someone about it. And I think what happened is we'd made the decision that we were going to leave our jobs and go back to Cayman in 2011. The year before that, so 2010, we'd actually sold our house. We'd moved into rented accommodation, and the rent was coming to an end in 2011. At that point in time, we owned a little place, like a holiday place that we'd done up from, like almost like a stone and mud hut, if you like, to a little holiday home in France over 5 years, and that was brilliant. I went there to lick a lot of my wounds at times, you know, when things weren't going right. But so we had that place. So we moved, literally took a summer holiday, an extended summer holiday over those summer months before we moved back to Cayman. And whilst I was in France, I'd had my latest IVF round, and I actually found out I was pregnant. So, you know, bells and whistles and celebrations. And obviously 7 weeks later, I lost the pregnancy. 7.5 weeks later, I lost the pregnancy. So we're back to square one. So we then had a decision to make. We knew we were going to Cayman. We'd already secured jobs out there, and we knew we were going. And we looked at, when we got to Cayman, we looked at, we were still doing research around IVF. Financially, it was difficult. Emotionally, I'd had enough. Physically, I'd had what's called OHSS, ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, which is not nice, where basically your body produces, it's overstimulated, it produces too many eggs. Your blood pressure goes through, and it can actually be very dangerous. So I'd had that on both of my egg collections. So we had to look at, do I want to put myself through that? Do we as a couple want to put ourselves through that again? And we'd done some research, and we'd heard of a place in Denver, Colorado, that the doctors were absolutely brilliant. They had a really good success rate, because by now I'm like late 30s, you know, and my chance of success is dropping rapidly. So we had to make that decision. Do we want to do that? That in itself was a big discussion. More expense. It's very expensive because these guys are good. So it's more expensive than your usual doctors that you go to. Did I want to do that? No. So we said, you know what, we don't want to do that. We're going to take the holiday anyway. We went off to Denver, and we had a lovely holiday in Denver anyway. And then we did some traveling around America, and then we came back and said, right, that's the end of that chapter. We're done with the IVF. What do we want to do? And we'd already kind of, I guess, naturally for us, started talking about adoption then. And we started exploring adoption in Cayman, which is not impossible, but Cayman's a very small, close-knit community. There's only 55,000 people there. It's about 50-50 expat, local split. So if you adopt a baby, they're going to be a local baby. And being such a small community, that comes with its own challenges around contact with parents, you know, that ongoing link to the child, whether that's right for the child, massive emotional questions around that kind of stuff. And also, you know, Cayman were quite open in saying, well, you're expats, you may well move back. we weren't planning to at the time, but you may move back, and then one of our children gets removed from Cayman, and we don't really want that kind of thing, which I understand, heritage point of view. So then we looked at, me being from England, we looked at England, Rob being from Northern Ireland, we looked at Northern Ireland, basically got told that if we wanted to adopt from England or Northern Ireland, we had to move home. And Cayman was our home. We thought that was our home. We felt at home there. They said you had to be back in England or Northern Ireland for a year, and before we could even look at it. We're now both getting older. We don't have these years to play with anymore. We were also facing the fact that a lot of adoption agencies were saying, well, because of your age, because my husband turned 60 this year, because of your age, we will only allow you to adopt a child who has special needs. And we were both working full time. We didn't have additional time or funds to be able to, one of us at that point, to give up work, to be able to devote the time that a child might need who came to us with additional needs. So that wasn't really an option for us. So we kind of said, well, okay, where does that leave us? We started looking at international adoption. Oh, I also looked at Jersey and the Channel Islands as well, because my family hail from there on my father's side. They were quite odd about the whole thing. They actually basically kind of wrote back, at the time they were having an adoption drive. And they kind of wrote back and said, we think it's against the child's human rights to remove them from the island of Jersey. So kind of we were a bit flummoxed by this. We said, well, surely to give a child a loving, warm home, and a set of parents is not against the human rights. It can only be good. And my dad personally was really upset with this aspect. He couldn't believe that his home country, if you like, was giving us those barriers. So that was one thing we were not going to overcome. That was a no that we weren't going to overcome. So, okay, we couldn't go down that route. So we looked at international. And I think that was quite a natural journey when we started looking Cayman locally. That wasn't going to happen. We looked at our hometowns, our home countries. They said no, not unless we came back to live there for a while. Jersey had said no. So we were exhausting all these options as we went along. And then we said, well, actually, let's have a look at international adoption, because some of the kids out there, maybe they won't get such a chance as some of the kids maybe would do in England and Northern Ireland to get adopted. There are so many children in these baby homes. Let's look at a child that really may not have a chance of adoption. So we kind of started looking in the Eastern countries, the Bulgarias, the Russias, all around that area. And, I talk about it in the book, but we had some really strange conversations with potential agencies that conjured up all these worrying thoughts of men in dark leather coats in car parks handing over money and stuff. And, our values are not about that stuff. This had to be done above board. We're not handing over money in envelopes and all that stuff. It was really quite scary, some of the things that were turning up. So we were getting increasingly frustrated about where did we go with this. And we somehow stumbled through sheer perseverance of research upon at the time they were called the Russian Eastern European Adoption Agency, REEAA. And a wonderful lady called Larissa who ran that. She was Russian, based out of Vegas, and she usually helped Americans, people from the US, to adopt, but occasionally she dealt with British couples as well. And obviously we were a bit of an anomaly for her because we were a British couple living in Cayman. And this is where the red, amber, green chart started coming in, because a lot of the paperwork she wanted from the American or the British process just didn't happen in Cayman. So we had to overcome all that. But she worked with us, and she put up with some stuff from us, some problems, and worked really closely with us. And if it wasn't for her and her agency, again, this would never have happened. So that's how we ended up going to Russia. She took us, she supported us all the way through, met some wonderful people involved in the adoption process over there. And she found us our little girl, and she helped us bring her home. So I'm eternally grateful to her, and it wouldn't happen without her, basically.
Isn't it amazing the people you meet along the road, and do you believe in fate? Do you believe in, are you spiritual, religious? What way do you?
Yeah, I do believe in fate. I mean, one of the, again, it's quite personal, but had my miscarriage not happened, the baby would have been born early March, first week or two in March. I don't keep the date in my head because we never got that far. We weren't that fortunate. But my daughter's birthday is 15th March. And funnily enough, she is so like her father in so many ways that we always joke that actually, before this happened, we think he actually went off to Russia somewhere, and it is his daughter. We just happened to find her. And it's a personal in-joke between the two of us. But she is so like him in her outlook on life and her humour. Not like me at all. These two are relaxed about life, and they get on brilliantly. And mummy's a disciplinarian, and mummy's the not funny one, the knuckle down. It's uncanny how much they reflect each other's values, if you like. So, but yeah, do I believe in fate? had we not had the miscarriage, that baby would have been born around the same time as Malvina. And to me, you know, that's fate intervening and saying, well, actually, this is your daughter. And not everybody will understand that, but to me, that's massively personal. And she's nothing else other than our daughter, you know. And we see that every day in the way she behaves, the way she grows up, the way she's developing. It's wonderful to have her as a part of our family, really.
I'm curious as well. I mean, what's your takeaway in terms of the processing power of children? I mean, it sounds like, I mean, you know, you've laid your cards out. You've literally written the book in terms of, you know, saying this is almost, you know, if we're having a bad day or you want to know, it's in the book. You know, being 100% transparent. That's what it comes across as, right?
I guess I've tried to be, and I think I did that without realizing, really. Whilst I'm private, I'm a massively, honesty and integrity are are values of mine. And you know, if you're not showing integrity within what you write, then how are you going to be believable, I guess? If you're not honest with what you write, you know, my sort of going off the point a bit, my husband, there's a couple of chapters in there where we had rows after the miscarriage. You know, he was moving on and I wasn't. I was stuck in that place. And he said some things to me that were quite awful at the point. And he was worried. And again, when I lost my mum as well, it took me a full year to put myself back into where I needed to be. You know, I was stuck in that place for a long time, and it was a very dark place. And he was very supportive of me, but he got to the end of the year and he was kind of saying, you know, you need to move on now. So yeah, we talk about that in the book as well. And he was quite concerned that he was going to get hate mail from anybody who read it, you know, but quite the opposite, because the rest of the book talks about how supportive he has been. And I guess that honesty, whilst it wasn't intentional, it's one of my values, and it just comes out in the writing, I guess, to be believable and to sharing. I wouldn't say I'm the authority on all things adoption. I'm never trying to be that. I'm trying to be helpful. Everybody's adoption journey is different. You know, what I've done is I've tried to provide an insight to anybody, certainly from an international adoption standpoint, anybody who's thinking about it, is to give them that encouragement, but also to say, these are the realisms of it. You know, when there's one point I talk about aposeals, I'd never even heard of an apostle. You know, you have to get everything notarized. All your documents have to be notarized, and then they have to be aposealed, which is when the government looks at the notary who's notarized your documents and says, oh yes, we recognize that person as a legitimate notary, and they stamp the back of the document and they sign it. And in Cayman, for that privilege, for every stamp, they charged us $250. And we had reams of this stuff. I mean, we were talking in the, you know, £15,000 worth of someone going, stamp that, sign it, stamp that, sign it. And we simply did not have that money. So what we did was we took it to the deputy governor of the island and the legislative assembly over there and challenged it and said, hang on a minute, how do you get off? We've done our research around the world about international adoption, and there were some countries that didn't charge anything, some charged a nominal fee, some charged quite high amounts. But because the precedent had been set worldwide to charge lower amounts, we said, where do you get off in putting these barriers in our way? You know, you've supported us with the fact we are going for adoption, but here we are with this massive financial barrier that we simply cannot pay. We don't have £15,000 for someone to stamp the back of a document all these times. And the Legislative Assembly and the Deputy Governor of the island were absolutely brilliant. The Deputy Governor allowed it to be heard in the LA, and they basically heard it, took it seriously, and they put an upper limit on it of $3,500, which by that point we were already past. We'd already paid that amount of money, but it meant we didn't have to find another $12,500, you know, $11,500 to get there to pay for this stuff. So yeah, it's about giving that insight into anybody, I guess, that wants to do it, that there are going to be these barriers. Another one was the forms we had to fill out. I said earlier, I made reference to the fact that Larissa dealt with British and American systems. For example, Ofsted, you know, you have to get an Ofsted report. You had to find an agency to write your home study. Cayman doesn't have Ofsted. Cayman Islands did not have adoption agencies. So we had to say, that does not exist here. What is the acceptable option to the Russian court? And so, for example, with the agency, we were told that if we had a qualified registered social worker, the Russian court would accept reports from them rather than from an agency. So we overcame that barrier. You know, there had to be all these various different reports that the agencies simply did not exist in Cayman. So, okay, what was the nearest agency? How did they accept it? How would they accept it? How could we find a way around that? And that's where the red, amber, green chart came in, because it was like, okay, they've said no to that, but these are the options, which one will they accept? We had to take all this back to the Russian court. So I guess that knowledge that I'm trying to impart in the book to other people is that you are going to encounter this stuff. Do not lose faith, do not lose heart. There is a way to overcome this somehow. You've just got to do whatever your method is, whether it's sit down and break it down on a to-do list or a spider diagram, whatever it is. Find your way and find how you're going to do it, because you can do it. And don't take no for an answer, because you'll get there in the end. Just keep persevering. And I guess that's what the message of the book was in that context, I guess.
I'm going to change pace a bit. Simply ask the question, who are you?
Who am I? I started by saying a work in progress. I actually don't know who I am. I don't think I'm there. We said, am I where I'm meant to be at the moment? Yes. I am I said I'm an introvert. I'm a quiet person. I'm not out there shouting and screaming from the rooftops unless I have to, if I'm fighting for something I want. Deeply emotional person. Strong sense of right and wrong. I'll get massively impacted by the state of the world today. Can't watch the news without sobbing at something. Just think, I wish we could all get together and change this stuff and make it work. So I suppose in some ways people would describe me as principled. I haven't got the answers for everything. I try and find answers for things where I can. I'm massively supportive of my family. Family are greatly important to me. Don't have a massive circle of friends. The ones I do, they're massively important to me. Do not like injustice. I hate injustice. I can't bear listening to things about injustice. Animal lover. Got 2 rescue dogs. Had another rescue dog, but unfortunately lost her. In fact, we rescued 2 dogs in Cayman and paid thousands and thousands of pounds to bring them back with us when we came back here. And love animals. Would love to be. The older I get, the more I'd love to have some sort of animal rescue centre somewhere with lots and lots of animals surrounding us that we just kind of looked after. And that's come across in my daughter. She now wants to rescue donkeys. She's just adopted Benji from the donkey sanctuary in Belfast. So obviously I'm quite vocal in those beliefs because she's picking up on that. Person that loves, I guess I would say I love nature. I try something I do myself. I grow lavender in my front garden. Just started a blog, which nobody's looking at the moment, but you never know, somebody might find it on there one day, where I talk about the journey from Cayman to Ireland. But I also put on there this lavender stuff that I'm starting to do, growing it, harvesting it, making soaps and oils and lavender bags, which people are starting to say, have you got a website? No, I'm not that organised with this, but I'm just kind of giving it to family and friends at the moment. Really enjoy that. Enjoy my downtime being with people that are close to me. Don't need to be out. When I was younger, probably out partying a little bit more, but don't need that anymore. I've kind of done that bit, if you like. Would like the occasional night out with a babysitter. That would be quite nice, because we don't do that. None of us do that anymore, do we? With COVID. Driven by, if I see injustice, if I see something that I want to right, I'm driven by that. That will help me progress in the world. I'm happiest if I'm working where I'm doing something that makes a difference to someone else, I guess. That's quite important to me, working in an environment where, I do have that impact and I do make a difference to someone. Yeah, but certainly not perfect, far from it, got an awful lot of flaws, as some of the home study picked up. But again, work in progress, learning a lot about myself as a parent now, because whilst I've been, if you like, part-time parent with my stepkids, this is full on. And sort of said earlier about the challenges that Malvina came with, how I've had to adapt myself to deal with those. So I guess I'm quite adaptable. But yeah, got a fiery temper, terrible fiery temper. But then, and again, sort of not keep refer back to the book, that my father was quite the opposite. My father is someone that can't deal with stuff and will go quiet and won't talk to anybody. And that's had such a kind of, he and I had quite in-depth conversations about this, because I think he was upset that I put it in the book. And, it wasn't my intention to upset him, but it's, again, being honest. He will go quiet and wouldn't talk to us when we were kids. I won't do that, can't stand it, so I'll shout. If there's an issue, I'll shout, get it out of my system. And they're all to the point where they're like, oh, mummy's going off on one again, just let her have a minute and then she'll be all right in a minute, So that's my way of dealing with the emotional stuff, I guess, within the family. Blow up, calm down, everything's sorted. Which actually goes, is in contrast to how we dealt with the adoption all the way through, I guess, because that was so long and sustained. You couldn't keep blowing up. You could have your moments where you lost your emotions and you did break down, but you need to also be able to put yourself back together and carry on with what you're doing. And I guess the home study picked up on that a lot as well for us, about the emotional side. That came out for me. My husband was described as someone who just happy-go-lucky, just gets on with life, really, whereas I was described as someone who worries about everything, and they hit that spot on. So yeah, definitely a worrier. Yeah, I don't know, is that all about me? Maybe other people would probably tell you slightly different, but that's how I see myself, I guess.
What's your earliest memory?
Oh, I'm not good at this stuff. I'm really not. I'm not sure if it's a memory or a memory of a photograph, because I don't have the photograph anymore, but I remember seeing the photograph, and it is, I guess I was about 6 or 7, and it is a picture of me in a swimsuit. Don't know where it was, somewhere like Butlins, excuse me, or somewhere like that. Freezing cold, typical British summer. Your parents have taken you to a holiday camp, and I am stood absolutely freezing on, like, you know those shallow, if you like, water play parks you used to get, with terribly old-fashioned, with the statues and monuments all around them. Well, this was a lighthouse in the middle of, like, a paddling pool, if you like, big paddling pool. But I'm stood on the lighthouse, and I look absolutely freezing. I'm kind of shivering in my little swimsuit. And again, don't know if it's a memory of the photo or a memory, but I remember that. I say it must have been about 6 or 7, and some people can remember right back to when they were toddlers. I've got absolutely no memory of that at all. Again, there are photos that I can remember, that I know are photos that I can remember, but don't actually remember the event. So, and in some respects, you know, I'm digressing here. This does worry me, because my mum had Alzheimer's, and you know, I think, oh crikey, I can't remember back to my toddlership. Have I got issues? Am I going to get Alzheimer's as I grow older? And that's something that I've got to deal with, you know. But memory-wise, I don't have an awful lot of memories of being a child at all, and it's quite weird. I find that quite odd about myself, as does my husband. But you know, that's just one of those things. I don't have many memories of when I was certainly younger than 6.
Yeah, I mean, it's different. I mean, I think people have different. Some people, as you say, remember right back. Some people don't,
Yeah,
and what's real, what's not. I mean, it all becomes a bit hazy after a while, right?
yeah, it does. And I think as well, you know, our minds play tricks on us. History can rewrite itself in our own minds. You know, you'll swear that you went to a party and you were wearing this dress, and then when you actually look at the photo, you know wearing a trouser suit or something. So I think we're all guilty of that to some degree, which again is why I wanted to get some of this stuff down on paper, because my memories will fade. I don't think the emotions so much will fade. You know, they can be triggered by various things. You know, I said earlier about my daughter asking me who's my real mummy. A couple of weeks ago, she came out with during lockdown, just before she went back to school, you know, what is my birth mummy's name? You know, I don't know. It's a Russian court. We're not allowed to know. I don't know if the Russian authorities know. And that's why I guess I want to get this stuff down on paper for her, because my memories will fade of it, and certainly the technical process and the technical side of it. And I want her to understand not just those emotions and what I was feeling, but also where she's come from, what processes we had to go through for her to get to be here, living her life with us. And because my memory doesn't retain that stuff, it was important to get it on paper, I guess, to share it with her and anybody else who's interested. Which is where the second one came in, because the second book morphed into, we'd missed so many of her firsts, you know, her first steps and stuff like that, that when we started seeing her first, when we bought her home, I wanted to capture that, and I wanted to get that down on paper, so that stuff that she might not remember, you know, the first time she saw the moon in Cayman, it was one of those really, really full low moons, and I was walking the dogs, pushing around the block, and she literally would turn the corner and this moon was right in front of us, and it kind of puts it into context that she probably never would have seen this before, because she's not been outside the baby home but since 10 months old. And you know, she just went, "Mummy, look!" And the wonder on this kid's face, just because the moon was there in the sky, you know, things we take for granted every night, was amazing. So she doesn't remember that incident now, so that's what, to make sure I remember it and I can recall it, but also she remembers it. I wanted to get all that down on paper to share that with her, if you like.
That's awesome. And as you say, the delight of a child's innocence about certain thing,
Yeah,
and it's a lovely memory to have anyway. But as you say, extra special when it's a first, as you said.
yeah, yeah, very much so. Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
what's your take in terms of children's perception and ability to process? Because I mean, these are deep questions, and kids. My own kid asked me yesterday in terms of how do we speak, and it's like going, oh, that's right.
yeah, it's,
Deep.
I mean, they ask some questions that are way out there. Kids constantly amaze me, and it's you don't have these answers to technical stuff that they come out with, but with her, she's got these other questions. Her ability to process. I think when I first wrote the book and launched it 2 years ago now, just over 2 years ago, she was just happy that she was famous. Her little picture. I mean, this is a little picture of her. Here she is. That's the second one. She's laughing away, smiling away. Her little picture on a book. And funny enough, one of her kids in her class, one of her friends, whose mummy I knew, apparently when this all kicked off, this kid went home and said to her mum, "Mummy, why have you not written a book about me?" And I'm like, oh God, what was started? Oops. So she at that point was just kind of happy. Malvina loves attention, loves being the center of attention. I mean, this is one of the challenges we had with her when we first brought her home. If she wasn't, and quite understandably, if she was not getting attention, she will do something to get it. Whether it's good or bad attention, she'll do something to get it, even to the point where she'll get told off, she knows the attention's on her. So in that manifested itself in the book, I guess, with the fact that all these book covers were out there with her picture on it. We were doing interviews. I was chatting to different people. I was trying to promote it, and she loved it, And our friends were really supportive of it, and they were giving her good feedback about what a lovely little girl she is and all of this. Interested in her story, and she loved all that. How much she actually processed about what that meant and what was behind it. We have taken video diaries all the way along this adoption journey. So, from our first visit to Russia, right to I've got a really good friend who lives in England who was actually in Cayman with us at the time, captured the moment our plane landed at Cayman Airport when we brought her home, captured all of that. And that is like one of my most treasured. I didn't realize she was doing it. It was like Annika Rice, but I didn't realize she was doing it. And it's brilliant. It's something we'll treasure. And, she and I sit down and watch that every now and then. And the older she's getting, the more that process is taking shape, the more she is able to process that, the more she's able to ask these questions. Probably around the time the book was launched, just before she finished school. She's in school uniform, ready to go. We had literally about 10 minutes to go, and she said to me, she named two of her friends, and she said that this set of twins that she's friendly with, she said, they're pregnant, Mummy. And they're like 6, So I said, no, honey, they can't be pregnant. They're 6. She went, well, they want babies, Mummy. I said, well, that's fine, darling. When they're older, they can probably have babies. She said, so they'll have a baby in their tummy, Mummy, won't they? And I said, well, if they're pregnant, darling, yeah. So she said, so I came out of your tummy, didn't I, Mummy? Deep breath time. She could have floored me. 6 years old. No, sweetheart, Mummy can't do that. Mummy doesn't have the ability. You didn't come out of my tummy. Deadpan. Well, whose tummy did I come out of, Mummy? And it's like, okay, again, it's one of those moments you have to just pick yourself up because the tears are there, they're coming, and the emotions are there, and you just have to be factual, and you have to know that this little girl wants something from you right now. She needs this answer. So we had a long conversation about she having a birth mummy again, and the adopted mummy, and she came out of a birth mummy's tummy. That day it didn't lead on to, well, why didn't my birth mummy keep me? But since then, we've had those conversations. She raises the question, and you never know what's going to trigger that. You never know where it's going to come from. So I guess there's a little part of you that's, you never really relax because you know she's going to ask you something like that. And again, that day it was that she's gone, okay, Mummy, and moved on, and we've gone to school. She had a wonderful day at school. 2 years later now, the questions are getting more in depth. When she asked me who her birth mummy's name is, and I say, I don't know. Why don't you know? She's very upfront about it, which is great in some respects because it means, I guess, that she trusts me and she can ask those questions, which is massively important for me. Why don't you know? Well, can you find out, Mummy? And we'll have all this conversation. And we were walking the dogs having this conversation the other day, and she actually said to me, Mummy, when I'm older, I'll probably find my mummy on Facebook, won't I? And I'm like, oh my goodness, and then that triggers a discussion about, well, that's a very personal choice, honey, and if you want to do that, I'll support you. You know, we've got friends who are adopted that have never gone and found their birth mummy, because they see their parents, if you want for a better term, as their real parents. My husband said the same. He said if he was adopted, he wouldn't be looking into it because the people that raised him are his mum and dad. That's very clear in his own mind. As a female, I feel that slightly differently. I would probably, there'd be so many unanswered questions for me. I want detail. I want to know where I came from. And that in itself is a journey that we may well have to embark upon in years to come. You know, we've already promised her we'll take her back to Russia when she's old enough to understand, and when she's old enough to remember, because there's no point in going now sort of 8, you know, when we're sort of talking 12 into 13, that's something that she'll be able to understand more and appreciate, and I think she'll be able to process that more then. But you know, she'll be there. Mummy, can they use the internet? She's from a gypsy background, and I do use the term. I know a lot of people are uncomfortable with the term gypsy, but this is how the terminology that is used in the Russian court. It's not traveller, it's gypsy background. Is how they use it in adoption. So she's been told she's from a gypsy background. So she'll go on and she'll look at gypsies in Russia on the internet, on the images, and how she would have lived had she still have been there. And you know, there's a whole raft of this stuff yet to come. And at the end of the day, she's getting to process it more as she grows older. The questions will become more intrusive. We've got a raft of court documents, some of which are going to be very difficult for her to read, about people she was matched to before we came along, local people in Russia that paid no interest in her whatsoever, purely because she was from a gypsy background, about how people didn't come and see her from her own heritage background. Nobody came looking for her. So that's a massive decision we've got to make as her parents when she's old enough to process that and give her any support she wants with that. She's actually a very strong little girl, but she does internalize a lot. So we're going to have to take those decisions. You know, we're going to make mistakes along the way, but we're going to have to take those decisions when we think she's ready to know it, and just be honest with her, really. That's all we can be, I guess.
I'm just curious. I mean, how do you maintain your own self-care? I mean, there's so much attention and so much energy and emotion and all going on this outside influence, and I don't mean that positive or negative. It's just it's another side. I mean, how do you maintain you?
You know, you develop strategies, I suppose, and techniques, as does anybody. You know, we all face our own challenges, our own demons that we deal with. I'm very lucky in the fact that my husband and my family are very, very supportive. You know, there were times when I remember saying to my husband, you know, she's not coming, is she? We'd met her by then, and I said she's not coming with everything that's going on, and he's like, yes, she is. He is a massively positive person. I'm not. I'm half. We do the old half full, half empty. I'm half empty every time. Well, it's not even half full. The glass is full for him, you know. And that kind of got me through it, I guess. And I have selfishly lent on that all the way through this journey. And, you know, outside of this journey, that's a big part of how I deal with my self-care, is to talk to him and to just, you know, he's very good. He'll go, okay, put down whatever he's doing and listen and, you know, help me with that. And we've gone on our own journey, if you like, through the years, because he will want to find a solution. You know, we talked about finding solutions to problems. If I go, oh my God, this is bothering me, blah, he wants to find a solution. And I've had to say to him over the years, you don't necessarily need to find that solution. I just sometimes just want you to listen, because I can't, professionally, you've got this cloak on, you know, you've absorbed all the stuff we've dealt with in our careers over the years, you've absorbed all of that. And that's been massively challenging as well over the years. I guess being in the same career field for many years, we understand each other in that respect. We understand the way each other thinks, and we understand each other's values, and we are able to selfishly take advantage of that, as I think does any couple, if you have that level of understanding of each other. But also take him out of the equation. I think for me, self-care is a lot about just going for a run. You know, if things are getting too much, just take yourself off for a run, take yourself out of that situation. And the beach is half a mile down the road, go for a run down the beach, you know, and really just refocus your mind, kind of reset yourself. You know, I love being by the ocean. It's one of the reasons we live here. And just be able to sit and just look out and think, okay, actually I'm a very small person on this planet, you know, and there's billions of us floating around, and what's going on in this world is so much bigger than me, that yes, this is a massive problem for me now, but this is helping me. This run, thinking things through, doing an MOT, if you like, is able to help me with that. Sports does help me. It focuses my mind. And then, you know, with something like this, actually, as I said earlier on, just physically writing it down and going through your emotions and rereading it every now and then I'm able to just, the older I get with it as well, the longer she's with us, I'm able to understand more of those feelings now and accept them than perhaps I was at the time. And try and learn from it, you know, because there's no point in going through all those emotions if I can't actually put it to good use for the future, and try and learn how I dealt with that and would I deal with it that way again. So I guess I'll look at myself and I'll try and work out where I am and how that makes me feel, and just apply that to a future situation and make it work, I guess. It's a bit wishy-washy an answer, but I think probably that's the only way I can deal with it. You know, you lean on your husband, but you also find your own ways of simply going for that long run, taking that time, doing some exercise, refocusing your mind. I am very good at listening to the little voice in my head that says, you're absolutely rubbish, you can't do that. And that, being able to just switch that off and say, look, we're not going there, is a massive part of self-care for me.
I was going to say, in terms of inner chatter, how does that go?
Well, I don't shut up talking to you, but I certainly don't shut up on inner chatter. It's constant all the time. Yeah, and I know a lot of people have to deal with that. It's very difficult. You know, a husband can get in bed, and he can literally switch off. Good night, gone. You know, I'm like, oh, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm still awake thinking about this. You know, and yeah, it's a constant battle.
Where does that come from, do you think?
I guess being not a very massively confident person is a driver in that, because you're constantly second guessing yourself. You know, I'll finish this interview and I'll go, oh, that was really rubbish, wasn't I? Yeah, I could do the best interview in the entire world, and I'll still walk away and go, I was really rubbish, wasn't I? And then I'll have to sit down and listen to it back, and I'll actually at some point go, well, that bit wasn't too bad, and that bit was actually quite good. That I didn't half waffle there. But it's that methodical process of one of my earliest training courses was about the experiential learning cycle and taking yourself around what was the situation, what did you do, and so what did you learn from it, and what would you do different next time? And I guess I'm constantly doing that in my own head all the time, which is exhausting. But it can take over. You can have an interaction with the postman or the Amazon delivery guy and think, God, did I upset them? Did I say something that's wrong? You know, and you have to guard against that, I guess. But yeah, there's a lot of chatter going on there a lot of the time.
I'm just curious. I mean, do you ever have a time in your life when you were, you didn't have that voice?
Oh, that's a very good question, actually. I remember it being there in my early teens, certainly. Whether it was there as a youngster, I don't know. I do talk about, funny enough, and you talk about early memories, when I was in junior school, and it's not so much the voice in my head, but it's the worry side of things, I guess. There was an incident with somebody in the class who'd wasted, it was a wet break, a rainy break, and somebody had wasted a lot of paper drawing, and school was about to finish, and I had one of those wonderful teachers, Mrs. Smith, who was just the old-fashioned, you did not question the teacher, and the days when teachers were like this, you know, and it was the old-fashioned teacher methods, but I loved her. I thought she was brilliant. And she basically turned around and said that school was due to go out and we weren't leaving the building until whoever had done this and wasted all this paper owned up. And so, of course, I was worried about being late out of school to meet my mum, so I owned up, and it wasn't me that did it. So then, obviously, I then got told off and she knew I didn't do it. She knew exactly who it was that did it and was waiting to see if they owned up. So my 7-year-old self, or whatever I was, no, I was junior school, so yeah, 6, 7 or 8, owned up to this. Then my mum got summoned, and obviously I then got told off for lying and taking responsibility for something I didn't do. So I guess that the worry has always been there, whether it's then morphed into chatter in the teenage years, which would make sense because that's when you obviously start developing your personality, who you're going to be, or there's so much change going on in your life at that point. I guess I can remember it there then. Whether it was there younger than that, I wasn't necessarily aware of it. It might have been, but I wasn't necessarily aware that it was there, you know.
Is there a bit of a pleaser gene going on there?
A pleaser gene? What, trying to please people?
Mm.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I don't like seeing people unhappy. And if I thought I was the cause of someone being unhappy or offended, you know, then that would make me extremely unhappy. And we all do that. We can't help it. We're not going to go through life pleasing everybody. You know, people are going to get offended at things that you say. But I am unhappy if I think I've offended someone or upset them. I find that very difficult to deal with. So yes, I do want to please people, but not to the detriment of my own values. Now I'm an adult, if you like. You know, I certainly wouldn't admit to something that I haven't done nowadays, because obviously I've grown up, I've moved on, and you develop and you mature. But yeah, it's if I very naive and innocent in some ways. If you could live in a world where everybody was happy, wouldn't that be wonderful? But you know, life's not like that. So yeah, you can only do your best.
It was just interesting. In terms of then, I mean, what would you say is your superpower now? What's your
Superpower.
hmm.
See, my first reaction to that is, oh God, I don't have one. You know, but superpower. I guess adaptability. You know, in my working career, before I sort of gave all that up, you would be put in situations where they're pretty damn serious situations sometimes, and you've got to deal with what's in front of you. You've got to make decisions. You've got to do it now, timely, and you've got to keep a record of those decisions, and you are going to get scrutinized and called to account on those decisions down the line, sometimes a couple of years down the line. And you've got to be flexible, you've got to be adaptable, you've got to be creativity. I'm not saying they're all my superpowers, but kind of that genre, which is when going back to the fire in the belly, what does it mean to me? When somebody tells you no, you've got to be able to say, not accepting that. So how do I overcome that? And there's that's where that adaptability comes in. You know, I'm not a great one for massive self-belief. Yeah, I can make this work. I'm a great one for saying, okay, I want to make this work and I believe I'm going to get there, but it's not about me as a person. It's about the steps I now take to overcome that barrier and how I get there. So I guess really the ability to adapt to that situation and to say, right, this is what's happened, this is what my options I do now, and this is what I need to do going forward. I guess I'd also like to say I'm a good listener. You know, I try to be, whilst I do talk an awful lot, as you can tell. I do try, certainly when it comes to family and friends and people that are in a need at a moment in time, you know, I will try and listen and be non-judgmental. Obviously there is unconscious bias going on there for whatever the situation is. We've all got it, but just try and be that listening ear. And again, going back to pleasing people, make sure that person finds where they're going themselves, but be there if they need it. I'm lucky to have family members, especially my husband, who do that for me. So if I can do that for someone else, then yeah, that would be, if I could get to the point where that was a superpower, that would be wonderful, to be able to help others, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's what it is. Do you enjoy responsibility?
Yes. When I've got it, I sometimes go, oh my God, what was all this responsibility? You know, with a managerial job with people, up to 100 people in your team. But when it's taken away and I've moved from that sort of environment in a purely working professional environment to an environment where I might be a staff officer or you know, something where I've got nobody reporting to me, I miss it. So I like having responsibility for a team, if you like. I like having responsibility for outcomes, and I like having responsibility for making a difference in whatever form that might take, a positive difference. What I don't like, what it comes with a massive health warning, as I've experienced many times before in my career, is when you're given responsibility, but you yourself, talk about self-care, have no support. You know, you are, for want of a better term, put in this place where a situation may happen. You're quite happy to deal with it, you take responsibility for it, but there are going to be repercussions, and then everybody else, you look behind you and there's nobody there. You know, nobody to support you. I've actually dealt with 2 employment tribunals in my time, which I took as a massive personal insult. You know, I was being accused of all sorts, you know, and I was like, well, that's not me. How can I be being accused of this? And I think I said earlier on, you know, when I was first talking to you, that record keeping for me is a detailed record keeping, all that kind of thing is massively important. The reason that I won these tribunals is because not only was I able to take the processes and tools in my toolkit of the organisation that I work for and apply them, but I kept records meticulously to say, and that was my responsibility. You know, this organisation is being accused of this, me personally, but the organisation, and that's simply not what happened. And there's an awful lot of untruths being told here. So the responsibility for me was to take that and make it work and to prove evidence in an employment tribunal. And both of them we won. You know, we won because we did the right thing. We won because we kept the records to prove we did the right thing. And I suppose the sense of, not pride is the wrong word, but the sense of relief, the sense of happiness that you get that you've been vindicated in that situation. Remember, I said I can't stand injustice. Had we have lost those, it would have been an injustice. You know, for me, that is palpable. It's massively important. So, yes, the responsibility, but you also, as an individual, whoever, it doesn't matter how high on an organisation you go, if you've got responsibility, you also need your friends, your critical friend, your organisational backup, whatever, however you want to put it. There's got to be someone there for you. You know, you've got to have that support, because you can't be left on your own, because nobody can deal with that. So yeah, responsibility, and I enjoy giving responsibility to others and kind of empowering them, but being there if they need me as well. You know, if you can train someone and empower them to go on and do that, then great. You know, I can retire and just go live my life with my lavender farm. You know, but yeah, I do enjoy it, and I miss it when it's not there.
Just curious in terms of, you know, you talking about injustice, and it's quite a strong, it's obviously, it evokes a strong emotion for you. And I'm just wondering, back when you were a child and, you know, that sort of blow off, you know, that sort of, do you think there's a connection between some injustice in your childhood and, you know, such a fierce reaction? Is there a connection, do you think?
I think some of it is, you talk about nature versus nurture, don't you? I think some of it is probably in the genes I've inherited from my own mother. She was a lovely person, strong sense of values, and for want of a better term, right and wrong. And that obviously came across now genetically, but in my upbringing. But also, you know, there's been times when I had a very, very close friend many, many years ago, and again, talk about it in the book. The area I lived in wasn't the most pleasant at the time. Very close friend in junior school who, on moving to senior school, chose a different path to me, got in with a group of people that I didn't necessarily class as friends. Their behaviour didn't fit how I thought you should behave in life. And as a result of that, I ended up getting bullied, threatened, used to be frightened to walk to school. You know, we lived on the end of terrace block of houses. We had nasty slogans written in white on our wall in chalk. We had eggs thrown at our house. Just horrible stuff. Now, my mum had kind of never dealt with this stuff. She was quite innocent lady, my mum. She'd never dealt with any of this. She didn't know how to deal with it. My dad didn't know how to deal with it. It was massively stressful for all the family. And growing up with that going on, living with that fear, I guess, and nothing happened. You know, there was no penalty for them. There was no punishment. They just got away with it. You know, middle of the night, they'd be out there banging our back gate, you know, waking the whole family up. And although that's very low level stuff, it's not violence as such or anything aggressive like that, but it's nuisance behaviour. You know, and that was in many, many years ago when communities weren't as big, there weren't as many people around, there wasn't as many challenges in your community nowadays. And there was just nothing that stopped it. You know, eventually we moved away, but there was nothing that stopped this. And this went on for a number of years. And how can you have a teenager frightened to walk into school? And this was a friend of mine who was a really close friend who we split up friendships, and it just got horrific. So I guess certainly from that age, early teens, going into senior school, 11, 12, that sense of injustice, I guess, was forming then, you know. And then obviously when you go to senior school, you're exposed to a great deal more of stuff that goes on in the world. I mean, we sat down the other night with my little girl and she saw 9/11 on the television. She wasn't even born there. And she became fixated with this. And I thought, crikey, how much do you tell an 8-year-old? Because you don't want to give her nightmares. But, you know, this is constant challenge. Am I getting it right? Telling her this stuff. And she's been exposed to that at her age. And she's mentioned it a couple of times twice and called it a bomb, you know. But she's mentioned it a couple of times twice. And I sort of said to her, sweet dreams, honey. She went, Mummy, I might dream about that bomb, you know. And we've got to help her through that. But as she gets older, she's going to get exposed to more of this stuff, as you do when you go to senior school. You get taught about history and all the niceties and the horrific stuff that's gone on in history. And I guess that gets built upon during your senior school years, really. But the earliest I kind of remember feeling that is around that transition, with that friend letting me down and moving to a different path to me. And it was a massive impact on my life, really, that you've got, not only is all this horrible stuff going on, but I lost a friend. And then, you know, you've got to toughen up. You go to school and you toughen up and you find a way through it. But I guess that's probably the earliest memories that probably started forming that. There might be something before that, but that's probably had the first impact that I can remember that kind of started forming that viewpoint for me, I guess.
Isn't it amazing all the stuff that happens and you know, for whatever reason, right and wrong and all the rest, you know, in our childhoods.
Yeah.
What's a particularly proud moment for you?
A particularly proud moment for me. I don't really do pride an awful lot. I obviously when I bought little one home, you know, pride, is it pride? I guess there is a bit of pride because yes, we made it happen, and we have now that goal that I've been working to for 5, 6, 7 years is we've done it, we've achieved it. That emotionally is the proudest moment, I guess, for me, because I've now started on a path where I've got a little person who's totally dependent on me, that I can influence, that I can help grow, that I can help develop, that I can teach so much stuff to, you know. So, and it, I guess it took me a while to realise that, but Rob, my husband, said to me, you know, after when we got home and things started to settle down, he said, we did good, didn't we? And we did do good. We overcame all of that stuff, you know. And you can allow, they always say, I was taught pride comes before a fall, so it can be seen as a little bit of a negative emotion for me because you're frightened, you don't want to appear too big-headed or anything, you know. But but you can kind of sit back and go, yeah, we did do that, we did it, you know. And I think actually taking it probably a little bit, thinking about it one step back from that, the the moment it really kicked in was not when we landed in Cayman with her. We had to come back, we had to leave Russia, come back to the UK, land in the UK, swap planes and go back to Cayman. Now, originally our intention was to stay in the UK for a few days with little one and let family meet her that lived in the UK. Whole chapter devoted to in the book about that never happened, because to go to Russia, you can't just rock up to Russia, you have to have a visa. Visa lasts 30 days. Whilst we were there, she had to have a visa to get out of Russia to England, so we had to get her a visa to go the other way. While on our second journey, when we actually went to bring her home, the process changed, and instead of the visas for Russians leaving to go into the UK being done in Moscow or in St. Petersburg, they were moved to Milton Keynes, of all places. So there was no way, by the time we landed, we had a month, by the time we landed, we had our medicals, we had the court case, we were awarded custody, we collected her from the baby home. There was no way then to physically get her a visa, to get her out of Russia into the UK before our visas run out. And obviously you don't overstay your visa in Russia because you're going to find yourself in jail somewhere. So all of this, everything we fought all the way through, then ended up with we can't get her out of the country. She's ours, she's in our custody, she's living in an apartment with us, and we can't get her out of the country. The UK won't let her in. So we had to overcome that barrier. And you know, we talk about in the book how we overcame that barrier, and the help of the immigration service at Heathrow were mustard. They were absolutely brilliant. They you know, again, they solved a massive problem for us by us just pushing it. We got the right person and they solved it. And I think why I'm saying that is because we're only allowed 24 hours in the UK because she didn't have a visa. There's a thing called transit without a visa. If you've got your onward ticket and you've got your passport and you can prove that you go in, they will allow you into the UK for 24 hours. So we were allowed to leave airside and go into the Sofitel Hotel at Heathrow 24 hours. So we booked a suite and the family came out, and literally we had about 5 hours, not even that, 4 hours with the family before we went to bed. And next day we got the flight to Cayman. So I think the question about pride came, and I didn't realise it was pride at the time. It was just a culmination of everything. But we flew back from Russia to Heathrow on British Airways, and when that plane took off, we got through. It's a long process. I didn't think we were going to be allowed out of the airport at Russia, but we got on the plane, we boarded the plane, and when it took off, I felt safe for the first time in a long time because we were on British soil. This is moving me to tears, actually, funny enough, and that was British soil. We were going home, you know, albeit Cayman, it was British soil. So as that plane took off, little one wanted to use the toilet, so my husband took her off, and as we came through the clouds, and we looked out, the sun was above the clouds. And I think at that moment, was it pride? Possibly. I didn't realise it at the time. Everything just completely overwhelmed me, and I just sat in the middle of this British Airways plane in my suit, sobbing hysterically. And did I look back and see that pride? Didn't realise it at the time, but yeah, I think some of that was. I was proud of the fact we'd done it. You know, we got her out. We got her out. We were taking her home, and we'd achieved that goal. And after years and years of exhausting treatments and invasive therapies and miscarriages and you name it, we've been through it. This little girl was sat in a little seat next to me on the plane, and we were going home. And I think that probably, there's lots of pride around exams that I've taken and promotions I've got and stuff, but from a human perspective, that probably is my proudest moment, shortly followed by when we landed and got home to Cayman. But that there on that plane, I think would probably be the answer to your question in 15,000 words, you know.
No, it's always interesting. I mean, and you know, because I mean, you can potentially sort of reword pride into gratitude, you know, and
Yeah,
what are you grateful for,
yeah,
and that changes the energy on it, but it's one and the same thing, I believe. You know,
absolutely.
it's sort of,
Yeah,
you know, that moment of bursting through the clouds, both metaphorically, physically,
and
and
physically, yeah.
yeah, you know,
I
it's
mean,
sort
there are
of,
so many people that we're grateful to. I've tried to say thank you to them in the work that I've written, but you always miss someone. But realistically, and bringing it right back down to earth, there are so many people that without whom this would not have happened, that were my support network in various different stages, that you know, yeah, I can't say thank you enough. Without them, it just wouldn't have, it would never have happened. Even the judge that did the judge that did the Russian adoption, and the judge that then did the adoption when we got her back to Cayman, even that, you know, there was a problem with that. And social services in Cayman at that time were saying that they didn't think they were going to, there was a potential possibility that they weren't going to recommend us for adoption, because the law had changed. So you could either have a full readoption or a what's called a ratification order. And I was like, look, I don't care how we do this. You know, you can't not do it. She's ours. We've just got to get it done under your law. So the judge actually intervened. The Attorney General got involved. So we were grateful to why they got involved, goodness only knows, but they picked up the case, and we were so grateful to them, because they argued on our behalf, because social services were saying, no, we're only going to give you a ratification order. Attorney General argued on our behalf, went to the judge, and the judge issued her a full adoption order, because family court, and he was looking at what was in the best interest of the child, and he said this will secure her the best future. So even that judge putting himself out on a limb for someone that he doesn't know, he's never even met, you know, but saying, hang on, the letter of the law applies here, and family court, this is the best interest of the child, and taking that decision. You know, so many people we're grateful to. I could be here all day really saying thank you. So yeah.
no, it's awesome. I mean, as you said, there's so much to be done. Do you like yourself? Do you love yourself?
Oh God, I have to stop myself going, absolutely not, I really don't. I'm not particularly, which is a failing of mine, I guess. But yeah, I'm not particularly enamored with myself. I'm constantly looking at my negative spots and trying to work out how I can make them better. Something I've always done subconsciously without really being aware of it, I guess. My husband and I have this conversation quite a lot. He's quite enamored with himself. He likes himself a lot. Not in a big-headed way. He's comfortable with who he is. He likes himself. He's comfortable in his own skin. I'm not. I'm socially quite awkward. Hate networking. Terrible at networking. Keep getting asked by members of my family why I don't market my book more, because I don't like marketing, because you have to go out and speak to people. I don't like doing it. I'm not a good networker. And my little daughter's peering at me through the window and waving at me now. Look, so those kind of areas I'm not comfortable with. I'm quite socially awkward. I like, I guess, the component parts of me. I like my values. I like what I fight for. I like what I stand for. I like the fact that I rescue dogs. I mean, I adopt them, the mantra, adopt, don't shop. I won't buy a pedigree dog. I'll go to the rescue centre and take the scraggiest mutt there is. You know, one of the Cayman dogs that we brought home, bless her, she was on death's door when we found her. She'd been terribly mistreated and was covered in mange, and they were going to put her down. I was like, no, here's my credit card, just pay for her treatment. Which at the time was interesting, because it was still very heavily indebted with adoption costs, and then they hit us for $3,000 to make the dog better. So, you know, I've got that madness thing going on. I can't stand seeing souls that are hurting and want to rescue everybody. So the values, the component parts, yes, I like them. Putting it together, you know, I'm not particularly enamored with myself, but that's why I describe myself as a work in progress, I guess, because I'm always trying to make that better. And one day I might get there. I might get to a little old lady that sits there and goes, you know what, I'm not too bad. I'm not there yet. I'm working on it.
Well, it is interesting to
Brutally
see.
honest.
Yeah, no, listen, and that's what it's all about. You know, it is a journey for a lot of people as well. You know, so it's always there. In terms, then, I mean, what's Again, a bit of a change. I know I keep changing. What's a guilty pleasure for you then?
Guilty pleasure.
Mm.
Oh God, red wine, chocolate, metaphorical or literal, oh, guilty pleasure. Oh my goodness. Travel. Travel is my guilty pleasure, I guess, because I love learning new stuff. I love looking at someone going, haven't been there. What's that place like? What's the culture like? What's the history like? What's the heritage like? What do you do? What can you do? I miss travel. When we lived in Cayman before we adopted little one, we were talking earlier about freedom. By then, Rob's kids were all grown up, and we actually had a lot of freedom on our hands. So we did quite a lot of traveling, and we've been to quite a few places. We've worked hard, saved money over the years, and spent it on travel rather than getting a bigger house necessarily. That's what we both aspire to. So for me, it's going out there, finding out new things about the world, exposing myself to new places, new people. Whilst I say I don't like networking, you take me somewhere new though, and I'll be fascinated by the people, the smells, the sounds, the sights, and things that I don't know about, kind of broadening my mind like that. And obviously that since we've come back, when we came back from Cayman, we said, look, we'll go around Europe. We've done a bit. We've done kind of the Santorinis, we've done Rome, we've done Canary Islands, but money is not as free now because we've got an 8-year-old. There's only one of us working. I'm just embarking upon a new job now, but for a while there's only been one of us working. And Cayman, you earn a lot more money because it's Cayman. You don't pay tax. Everything is expensive, but there is a lot more money coming in. And obviously, when you come back to reality, you've got different responsibilities, different priorities, and obviously now COVID's kicked in. Nobody's going anywhere. But I've got a stepson out in Bermuda, as I say, that we're hoping to see towards the end of the year. I've got a stepdaughter still in Cayman. There are still many, many places on my bucket list that I want to go and see. Looks like sometime in the future we'll be going back to Russia, hopefully, obviously with little one. Who knows where her life's going to take us? I've got a grandchild that I've not seen yet, so that's in Bermuda. He's in Bermuda. So where his life will take us and how that will impact us, we don't know yet. So I guess the guilty pleasure is A, the travel, but also B, the possibility of what life means with that travel and where it might end up taking you. Love all that. But also love red wine and chocolate.
What's your choice of red wine and what's your choice of chocolate?
Oh, any chocolate, anything. God, dairy milk, Galaxy, anything really. Try not to eat it because then I have to do longer runs, especially now I'm approaching 50. Red wine, oh, love a Pinot Noir, Malbec, Beaujolais, love a bottle of Beaujolais, and a wonderfully fond memory, funnily enough, of my father-in-law. Again, I'm digressing, but when we were in our place in France, he was over staying with us one year, and he'd never had Pinot Noir before. We ended up in a lovely little place called Binic. I'm probably completely pronouncing that wrong. Anybody who's French out there, apologies. On the coast in Brittany, north coast in Brittany, and we sat down and we had a meal and we had a bottle of red wine, a bottle of Pinot Noir, which he drank most of because he was like, that's quite nice, give it over here, and lovely. We've since lost my father-in-law, but lovely memory of him discovering through us just ordering a bottle of wine to share at the table that we actually didn't get much of a look in, really. He had most of it. So, and being able to share that kind of stuff that you love with others is lovely. It's wonderful, and I'm very thankful for that, really.
And where do you feel most at home?
Where do I feel most at home? There's two answers to that question. Most at home is at home in my little house where we live, and in my garden doing my lavender. Love a bit of gardening. Never thought I'd say that. Getting older, the sight, having come back to live in Northern Ireland, the sight of a ploughed field nowadays is like, oh, that's lovely. That brings me pleasure. I mean, when did I get to that point in my life? That a ploughed field makes me smile. But love it. Love Northern Ireland, the whole countryside, the coast. Love being at home in my house, in my garden, in that setting. But where do I feel most at home if I could spend the rest of my days is, again, I talk about it ad infinitum in my work, in my book. There's a little place called Little Cayman, which is the smallest of the 3 Cayman Islands, and there are like 200 people that live there, and I just love it. I love it. It's so private. It's so beautiful. You've got the beaches, you've got the palm trees. I had my 30th birthday there, which was an absolute blast with some really good friends. had my stepson's 30th birthday there. Good friends of ours got married there. We weren't actually at their wedding, but we've seen the photos. And if I could end out my days, I always say it would be, I'd end up my days in a bikini with a book in one hand, a bottle of red wine in the other, on a hammock in a little Cayman. I'd be quite happy with that. But it's not realistic because immigration laws don't allow me to live there. I don't have status for living in Cayman. I'd have to go back and get that. And it's not realistic because really 200 people, we've got an 8-year-old, there's no school there for her when she gets to sort of senior school level. So it's not realistic, it's not going to happen. So in the absence of being able to be at home in Little Cayman, this is my little house here with my garden and stuff, very good second choice. I love it here. And I'm actually really glad we made the decision to come and try Northern Ireland for a while, because the option was to move back to England. And I said, I don't want to do that, we've done that, let's try something else. So here we are.
Beautiful. Yeah, listen, it's a great way to be. So tell us, what's your fire in the belly in 1 or 2 words?
My what, sorry?
Your fire in the belly in 1
Oh,
or
my
2
fire in the
words.
belly. Having that drive to keep going. And that means in your professional capacity, as I'm just about to embark upon a new job, I've got an awful lot to learn in that regard. Looking forward to that immensely, but it's also a little scary, obviously, because it's a lot of responsibility. Personal life, the adoption is so close to my heart. It's been a part of my life, the whole journey, for so long now. And to be able to sit and talk to you about that today, I'm taking a lot of pleasure from being able to chat to you about it and be an advocate and say to people, look, come on now, if you're considering, if you're where you are on your journey, if you are starting to think about adoption, international or otherwise, don't write it off. If one party in the relationship is thinking about it, because you're not always on the same page as your partner, have those conversations. Be brave to broach that subject, to say, look, you're my partner. We've made certain promises to each other in our marriage. It doesn't have to be married. We've made certain promises to each other in our life, and I need to talk to you about this. Be true to yourself. So the fire in the belly is, have that bravery, have that compunction, have that ability just to say, I'm going to take a chance on this. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to make these 3 first steps. And then, if you can get the agreement, it's something you want to explore, please look at these kids. These kids are, we've got videos of in the baby home, which I'm sure we were probably not allowed to take because they were government buildings and we were sneakily filming as we were in there. But these kids, they've got politicians making decisions about shutting down international adoption. They don't care. They don't care what's going on in the politicians' world. They don't care about that. What they care about is being safe, loved, secure, fed, clothed. When our little girl was handed to us, I kid you not, you get a naked child. They don't even let you take the clothes she's in. The knickers go back, the socks go back, the vests go back, everything goes back. You are handed a naked child and you are expected to arrive at that home to pick her up on gotcha day, as we call it, ready to take care of that child. So you bring the knickers, you bring the socks, the t-shirts, the vests, the coats, the little trainers, you bring them all along and you dress that child and you take them away. So what these kids are going through, adoption is worth a look. If you've got a place in your heart, in your family, that you could consider this being part of your life, please just go and explore it. It may not work out, you may not want to go down that route, but there's a massive foster campaign going on over here in Northern Ireland at the moment. It's all over Facebook, it's all over the news. If you're that way inclined, if you think you can do it, please explore it, because these kids deserve a future, they deserve help, they deserve choices. The one thing I like most of all is giving Mavina choices, choices she wouldn't have had. She's getting an education, she wouldn't have had that like she's got now. She's got choices for the future. She goes horse riding. She'd never been horse riding, she can tell me what she enjoys, she can explore things she enjoys, and she can start making choices for her own future, and that's massively empowering for her. And if I can say one thing to anybody out there, to go and do that and explore it and just make a difference to anybody, please do it, because that's my fire in my belly with respect to that. Just drive this adoption forward, get people to look at it, consider it. I'm not one for sharing quotes, but there's this wonderful thing my sister said to me the other day, and she sent it to me. She said, and I don't know whose quote it is, so if it is a quote, I apologize, because I'm not giving person credence for the quote, but it says, one day you will tell your story about how you overcame what you're going through now, and it will become somebody else's survival guide. And do you know what? That really resonated for me, because I'm now hopefully in the survival guide mode. And if I can give somebody else something in their survival guide through my journey, then that's what's translated into my fire in the belly. See if you can do it, and take some decisions and hopefully help someone. When we adopted, I'll just finish that. Sorry, I'm waffling again, but I'll finish that with, when we adopted Malvina, we heard a quote that said, when you adopt a child, it will not change the world, but the world will change for that child. And I've got that on my wall. I carry that with me because it's so true. It really is. The world has changed for her, and hopefully she's got a better world now. That's what I'm aiming for. So yeah.
Beautiful. There's so much there in Raise, and I can tell it's obviously something very, very close to your heart, So tell us, where can people get a copy of your books? Where can they hunt you down, track you down, follow you, stalk you, get more?
Yep. I'm not on Instagram. I was, but there was a lot. I'm just on Facebook now. I cancelled the Instagram account for sort of reasons that I won't really go into. But there's a Facebook. I'm Nina Harper 144 on Facebook. It's open to everybody. It's not. It's public. It's not for friends only. Both of the books are on Amazon. The first one is called Malvina, the very special little girl who stole our hearts. And the second one is called Letters to Malvina. So if anybody is interested, please go in and have a look at it. Please buy it. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it in paperback. And please write to me. My email address is, and I'm going to try and remember it now, Nina Harper 90, that's 90, at gmail.com. If anybody wants to drop me a line, say hi, talk about what they're feeling, thinking, I'm really, really up for that. I love sharing other people's stories. I've had some wonderful feedback from some of the reviews, people that have read the book, and they've actually contacted me direct, and mostly ladies, some gentlemen, but mostly ladies. And the stuff they share, mainly because I've shared, is wonderful to hear about their journeys and to hear what they're feeling and thinking, and how they can relate to what I've put in the book is brilliant. And if I am touching people in that way and I'm encouraging them, helping, supporting them, then that's all that matters for me. That's my goal.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it.